this is part 2 of the message, Can God and the Bible Be Trusted as a Foundation for Your Life? And it is actually a very brief summary of this book. Many of you got it. I was surprised to see how many of you hadn't yet read it. So maybe you were waiting for me to give you the Cliff Notes. That's what tonight is about, okay? It's a very, very, very brief summary to give you what's called a forspice, to give you a little taste, okay, of what's in the book. And let me just say this, if you haven't yet read it, it is the hardest book to get into, in my opinion. It's like if I didn't have certain individuals who I had, respect for saying to me, you need to read this book, and I didn't have respect for Jonathan himself, I wouldn't have continued. It was like, what is it? It's a crazy thing. But when you get into it, now you're engaged. And once you're engaged, it's like, wow. Jackie just kept saying, wow. So I'm going to give you a little wow, just a little wow. So last week, part 1, I relied on science specifically. That's what I was doing to validate God's existence. This week, I'm going to use something just a little stronger than science, because science is something that, changes, as we get smarter, and not everybody agrees with the science, but there's something stronger that we can all agree on, which is history. You don't think about it that way, but history is history, and it's there. History proves that only an entity that is able to see the future and the past could have written the Bible. Because history tells us exactly when, and where, and how, in minute detail, depending upon how much was written down, exactly how and when and where things are going to happen. And when they actually happen, historically and written down, there's not a whole lot to argue about. So that's what I'm going to focus on this week, is history. I'm going to start in the 1800s, okay? I'm going to start in the 1900s, is actually the 1800s, right? No, 19th century is the 1800s. What could I say? But first, if you're not Jewish, you may not know this. I need to explain something. Oh, by the way, the book is called, the Oracle, The Jubilean Mysteries, okay? Unveiled. Well, there's a reason for that, because it's about the Jubilee years, and not everybody knows what a Jubilee year is. So imagine we're in a time period where there's slavery, as in the 400 years, okay, we were slaves. Okay, well, there wasn't a Jubilee then, exactly in the middle of that, but there was many times, and there are many times, where the Jubilee years, which come every 50 years, okay, and we'll get into more detail about that, is simply when slaves were freed. That means today, Marty, you're a slave, and tomorrow you're not. And you're just freed. As simple as that, because of the Jubilee year. And at the same time, all the property, Marty, that was taken from you is given back to you, just like that. So it's now 14 years before the Jubilee year. Now, I'm making this up. This is not 14 years before the Jubilee. And Marty's about to be sold into slavery. Marie is going to buy her. Well, Marie, she has 14 years till you're giving her up. You get to use her land and all her resources for free, other than to feed her and keep her. Henry, on the other hand, well, here's the situation. The Jubilee year when you met Henry was 42 years before the Jubilee. Okay? So Henry's been around for a while. But when you went to buy Henry, do you think, everyone, would Henry have cost her more than Marty? Yes or no? Why would Henry cost more than Marty? Because she's got an expiration date of 14 years, and Henry had an expiration date of 42 years. So Henry, ding, 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 you are the loser. You get to be 42 years under Crazy Marie. Does everybody understand the Jubilees? There's a lot of things that go with the Jubilee, but the end of the discussion, at least for today and for what our purpose is that these years occur every 50 years. They are markers, very defined historical markers, past and future. We know when the next one will be, okay? So they are very specific markers, and they validate very clearly, which is the intent of this tiny little part of this teaching tonight. They validate very clearly that this being who we call God, who we say wrote the Bible, has to be someone who is outside of our space-time continuum. He must be. Why? Because he was able to tell us in minute detail everything that would happen, and it did. So hold on, you guys. You're about to be quasi-amazed tonight. If I had 4 hours, you'd be really amazed. So let's go back to lay our foundation, not in a Jubilee year, but you'll understand why in a moment. The foundation starts in 1897 with a well-known Jewish personality who's the founder of Zionism named Theodor Herzl. He wrote this. At Basel, which is in Switzerland, I founded the Jewish state. If I say this out loud today, I would be answered by universal laughter. Perhaps in 5 years, but certainly in 50 years, everyone will know. This was spoken by him at the first Congress, the first Zionist Congress, in 1897. Exactly 50 years later, in 1947, the United Nations took a vote. And Israel was given official approval to become a nation state. On May 14th, 1948, Great Britain released the land back to the Jews. So there was your release. And the amazing part is, now let's tie the Bible in. The Haftarah portion for that day began with this, and let's read it together. This is Amos 9:15. Together. On that day, I will raise up the tabernacle of David, which has fallen down. And it ends with, I will plant them in their land, and no longer shall they be pulled up from the land I have given them, says the Lord your God. So wait a second. On that day, I will raise up the tabernacle of David. And then it ends with, they're not getting pulled up out of the land anymore. So May 14th, 1948, just like every day of every week of every month of every year, there's a Haftarah portion, which I'll explain what that means in a moment. And there's a reading assigned for that day. So God said what was going to happen, used Theodor Herzl. Historically, we know that it's true. And then to verify that his Bible goes along with what he says, he wrote down for that day, this is what you're to read, that specific day in history. How's that? Pretty cool? Okay, let's practice. Wow. Jackie, you're really good at this. I want to hear you louder than everybody. Haftarah portions are simply writings from a group of men and women identified in the scriptures as prophets or Ne'evim. These are individuals that were chosen to speak specifically to the people on God's behalf to convey his message. And they are clearly defined. I don't have an announcements up here. You all have an announcements? Pick it up and look at it for a minute. Maybe this will actually have you start doing it. Okay, at the top of the page every week, Jackie takes the time to look up for you for the week. What is the Haftarah portion for the week? What is the reading? Okay, so you've got the Torah portion, you've got the Haftarah portion. Okay, it's written right on there. And it has something to do with reality right now. It's always cool. You just don't usually have a clue what's going on. Okay, but I'm going to tie some of it together. Okay, put it down. I just so you know, there's all these people are like, oh, that's what that is. Okay? All right, ready? Now, in between Herzl's prophecy in 1897 and its fruition came the Jubilee year of 1917. Did anything of importance happen in 1917? Yes, World War I, and the Jerusalem was liberated from the Ottoman Empire in 1917, specifically on June 5th of 1917. On a Jubilee year, Israel is freed. Jerusalem is given back, I should say Jerusalem. Until the Six-Day War, who took over the land? Who was in charge? I'm hearing it. Jordan. Okay? Until the Six-Day War. During the war, as you know, there was a bunch of Arabs, millions and millions of Arabs. They were supposed to take us out like that in the 6 days. Well, it wound up being 6 days because we ended it real quick. And Jordan was warned, don't enter the war. Don't enter the war. And Jordan ignored Israel, and they entered the war. Jordan controlled Jerusalem, the old city. And because they did that, on June 5th, not 1917, but 50 years later to the day, on June 5th in 1967, Jordan lost control of Jerusalem and Israel regained control. Can anybody say, wow? Jackie, come on, I want to hear you. You did? Here, you want a mic? All right, let's move forward again. That was 1967. So what is 50 years later? Do the math. 2017. That's the next Jubilee. And we now have a new president. President Trump, 2017. And like so many presidents before him, he made a campaign promise. He was going to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. The difference was he did it. Can anyone say, wow? This hadn't happened in over 2,500 years. So understand the importance of what occurred. That's a wow. All right, so now for you historical buffs, for those of you who know your Bible and so on, let's read about this king by the name of Cyrus, because he's often compared. Cyrus was the king of Persia. President Trump is often compared to him. And I'd like to just give you a little understanding why. So let's read first about what Cyrus spoke in a proclamation. Karen, don't put him up until I'm bringing him up, okay? Because everybody's reading and not listening. We good? Okay. He spoke a proclamation that fulfilled the prophecy that was given by Jeremiah. Jeremiah was not just a bullfrog. He was also a prophet, okay? Okay, so let's begin with Ezra 1 through 3, where the proclamation is made. Together? Now, in the first year, notice that, in the first year of King Cyrus of Persia, in order to accomplish the word of Adonai from the mouth of Jeremiah, Adonai stirred up the spirit of King Cyrus of Persia to make a proclamation, saying, "Thus says King Cyrus of Persia, Adonai, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth. He has appointed me to build a house for him in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whoever is among you from all his people, may his God be with him, may go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah." And this is what Jeremiah's prophecy said. Together? "For thus says Adonai, after 70 years in Babylon are complete, I will visit you and fulfill my good word toward you. To bring you back to this place, I will return you from exile, and I will bring you back to the place from which I removed you as captives into exile." Now, King Cyrus rose to power at the end of those 70 years. And it was in his first year as king that he ordered that Israel could return and rebuild Jerusalem. Okay? You all got that? Now remember that it was 1947 when the UN voted Israel into existence. And yes, President Trump rose to power 70 years later. In his first year as president, he proclaimed Jerusalem was officially the capital of Israel. And remember, this also happened to be a Jubilee year. His speech began with, quote, "It was 70 years ago that the United States, under President Truman, recognized the state of Israel," end quote. You understand? And this is where the book goes into lots of detail. All of these things, you know, when I speak of them after the fact historically, we can go, wow. But if you get into, which Jonathan gets into in detail in his book, all the details of things that had to happen, for all these things to happen exactly when, where, how, like I said, I could be up here for 4 hours and I would hardly touch it. Okay, but I'm giving you the cliff notes. So let's keep digging. We're having a little fun with this one, I hope. Let's keep digging. At the moment of Jerusalem's return in 1967, as required, shofar was blown by Rabbi Goren. Remember, this is Jubilee year. 50 years later, in 2017, President Trump, whose name means sound the trumpets, and in Hebrew, that word is shofar. President Trump, 50 years later, to the day, makes a proclamation. Pretty cool? Wow. Now, God has a sense of humor. Rabbi Goren's original name was Gorenchik, which means horn. And in Hebrew, the word for horn and trumpet is shofar. So one Jubilee is ushered in by Rabbi Horn, and the next Jubilee by a president named Trump. Wow. Just for fun, let's keep going. What day was the American Embassy officially opened in Jerusalem? May 14th, 2000. Let's try it again. May 14th, 2018, exactly 70 years to the day after Israel was officially born. Jackie? Wow. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said these words, and I quote, exactly 70 years ago today, President Truman became the first world leader to recognize the newborn Jewish state. Last December, President Trump became the first world leader to recognize Jerusalem as our capital. And today, the United States of America is opening its embassy right here in Jerusalem. And what did God know ahead of time? And what did he say ahead of time through his Bible in the scripture reading for that specific day? Let's read it together. You are to sound the shofar all throughout your land, and each of you is to return to his possession. God knows, wrote it down, and there it is. Now, we've spoken of the name Trump, which of course is his last name, but not about his first name, which is Donald, which happens to mean world leader. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Next time somebody says, yeah, well, what's your rabbi know? His name is Donald. He's one of the world leaders, you know? Okay, I'm going to switch gears here. This is going to be the beginning of my close. I'm going to switch gears and ask you to remember that the title of the message is Can God and the Bible Be Trusted as a Foundation for Your Life? Well, I believe that between last week's message, part one of this, and what you've heard today, there's more than sufficient evidence that both God and the Bible are real, they agree with each other, and they come from some kind of supernatural origin. Can we all agree on that? Okay. Only a being that is outside of time, our time, could have written down these future events with 100% accuracy, which in my mind absolutely crushes the common argument that you will hear that I've heard a million times, that the Bible was written by men, not by God. Yes, I agree. It was written down by men. But if they were wrong, if it was just men writing things down, all of this wouldn't all fall in line. History would prove that they're right. It was just written by men. Think about that. But they were never wrong. And you don't know one person, including yourself, that's ever been never wrong. Not a one of them has ever been wrong. What they wrote was completely past anyone's ability because they are unable to make things happen. They were unable to control when and how and where. And yet they did. So yes, God exists. He knows everything that is going on. But wait, if that's true, is it then unreasonable to ask these hard questions? If God is so powerful, why has the whole world gone to hell in a handbasket? Why isn't he fixing things? Isn't he supposed to be a God of love? Why are children born with leukemia? Good people dying horrible, horrible deaths from heart attacks, strokes, cancer. But the jerks of the world get the toys and all the money. Real questions that need real answers. And if I didn't know the answers to these questions and I looked around today, honestly, I don't think I would seek God out. So if you're watching me right now and saying, yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. If I didn't know why, I didn't understand why, I'd be in your camp. And I know that because I used to be in your camp. I wouldn't seek God out. Frankly, I don't know a reason that I would. He seems impotent and powerless. And to be honest, his followers are mostly hypocrites. And I hate hypocrisy. But what is it about this God guy? What is it about him that I would want to take even the time to explore and become pushed aside by my family and my friends? Why would I even want to do that? Ultimately, comes down to is what can he do for me? Doesn't seem to be doing too good for the other guys who bought into his deal. And honestly, I don't see the religious people who believe in him immune to all the crap that's going on in any way, shape, or form. All this stuff that life throws at them, they're not immune. Well, here is the answer. I wrote a book about all of this. Everyone in this room got a copy of this book, a hard copy. And you can get a hard copy. But you can get a copy of this book online right now, absolutely free. It's a short book. It's a funny book. It's a factual book. It has real answers to these and many other questions. And it will help you to better get through life. And it only takes about an hour to read. If you're a man, you don't have an attention span of that long. Therefore, you need several readings in the bathroom. So leave it in the bathroom. Don't look at me like that way, Baba. You know. Leave it in the bathroom. It's an interesting book. I'm allowed to say that. Because it's written with my attention span. Every 2 pages, the topic changes. So you'll have something new to read each time, you're doing your business, yes? So let's put up the onemessiah.org on the screen. Right now, while you're listening to me, look at the bottom right. Karen, is that in there? You looking for it? No. Okay, so I don't know how we missed that one. This is for you on the website that are watching us online. If you're not on this particular website while you're watching, because you could be watching this 2 years from now on YouTube or wherever, that's the numeral 1, Messiah, M as in Mary, ESSIAH.org. At One Messiah, on the bottom of the page, if you're watching me right now on the stream, it's on the bottom right is a little box that you just click on. You fill in your name and your email, and when you do so, you can be reading this book literally in seconds. Just so you're aware, if you're watching online, there is, again, nothing to buy. There are no catches. There's just answers, real answers to real questions. and they will change your life. So here is my final close. Fill in the form now. Oh, we got it up on the screen. Thank you. Fill in the form right now. I will never sell your name. I won't sell your email to anyone ever. So just like Nike says, just do it. And if you're thinking, oh, okay, so I can read the book for free, but there's something being sold in the book, or I have to buy something after I get the book, you would be absolutely wrong. There is nothing being sold in the book. The book's free. The information is free. The information does not come from me. It comes from a supernatural source. It will give you literally peace in your life and hope in your life. So what do you have to lose? Now, I want to say something that I'm not saying in a bragging way. I'm saying it in a realistic way. I'm told, I don't know if this is a fact, but I've read it and I've been sold it many times. There have been publishers in the early days that wanted to publish this, if you remember, that for every book that is sold or handed out or given or whatever, for every physical copy, there are at least 8 people who read it. So when I say, what do you have to lose? Approximately 500,000 copies in hard copies, meaning a physical book, are out there, which means about 4 million people have read it, if that's true. You'll be glad you did. I'm almost afraid to ask. I won't. How many of you in this room who got it for free when you came in have actually sat down and read it? Wow, look at that. I'm actually impressed. All right. There we go. She leaves them in the library, leaves them on the cruise ships, in Spanish, in Hebrew. Oh, no, not in Hebrew. Hebrew's only online. Anyway, onemessiah.org. Okay, it's on that website. Lots of my other teachings are on that website. And with that, Elihu,